When Kash Patel leaned into the microphone, the entire room felt like it shifted. The silence wasn't calm. It was loaded, tight, almost trembling with the weight of what everyone knew he was about to dodge. And that's exactly why the moment hit so hard. Because when a powerful official is given a direct question about one of the darkest networks in modern history and still can't bring himself to say a single clear name, that silence isn't confusion, it's protection. And today, you're going to see exactly how that protection works in real time. That IT started the moment a congressman asked him one of the simplest questions imaginable.
Gentleman, yes, back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman's recognized.
So I've got 4 documents I'd like to introduce into the record. The first one is Jeffrey Epstein's 6 story played out for years in plain sight. And Acosta is quoted in here saying, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." The second document is entitled, "What Epstein's Bodyguard Warned About His CIA Connections." The third document is from Fox Digital. It's titled, "Epstein's Private Calendar Reveals Planned Meetings with Obama Admin Official CIA Chief." And the last document is Wall Street Journal article that highlights Ehud Barak's 36 meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. He was the former Prime Minister of Israel and head of military intelligence for Israel. It may have held that title when he met Epstein, and then, yes.
Without objection, the gentleman will hold for a second. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one UC request. This is Judge Engelmeyer's decision from August in U.S. versus Epstein, stating the government's 100,000 pages of Epstein files dwarfs the 70-odd pages of Epstein grand jury materials.
Without objection, the gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I watched some of your Senate hearing yesterday when Senator Kennedy asked you, "You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself?" You replied, according to the transcript, "There is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else." You also said somewhere in the hearing and here today that the problem is that the case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007 and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations. Those constraints only apply to Southern District of Florida. They do not apply to Southern District of New York, the location of the 2019 sex trafficking indictment, which produced many things, including a series of FD 302 documents. According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to, victims including minors, such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre, may she rest in peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. Have you launched any investigations into any of these people, and have you seen these 302 documents?
Sir, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information, and we're working with Congress not only to divulge that information and produce it to you, but any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. There have been no new materials brought to me launching a new indictment.
So is the loophole here, or is it your assertion that these victims aren't credible, that the 302s maybe didn't produce credible statements that rise to a probable cause?
It's not my assertion, sir. It's the assertion of 2 different United States attorneys' offices from 3 separate administrations who investigated those same materials in lifetime.
Are the 302 documents in the FBI's possession?
They reviewed all that, yes, sir.
And so have you reviewed those 302 documents where the victims name the people who victimized them?
If I personally know, but the FBI has.
So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said all
I named one
information-
today.
I said we are not in the practice at the Department of Justice and FBI of releasing victims' names. That is not what we do. We are also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. That's not what we do. But multiple authorities have looked at the entirety of what we have.
Okay, I got to move on here. Were you present when the AG had the White House event when she released the binders to the social media influencers?
I was, yes.
So if you're willing to meet with social media influencers who stood to benefit from the sensational and sad stories of these victims, will you meet with the victims as well?
The FBI will meet with anyone who has new information.
Will you personally meet with them?
The FBI and the professionals who are handling the cases will.
Were you instructed that it was important to release the documents to the Oversight Committee on the day of my introduction of the discharge petition to release these files?
I don't know what day that was, so no.
Well, they were released that day, and there were victims' names who weren't redacted because they were in such a rush, and the victims are not happy about that. Have you investigated any of the CIA connections? Have you seen the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein? And if you wanted to see it, would they show it to you?
Well, I can speak for the FBI, and that's presuming there's a CIA case file, and I've reviewed everything that the interagency, not I, the FBI, that was provided to us.
Would you be willing to look at the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein?
If there is such a file, and if it has not already been turned over to the FBI will look at any new investigative leads.
Have you made any progress on the pipe bomb investigation January 6th? And have you made any progress on the motive of the Las Vegas shooter?
As to the first, it's an ongoing investigation, and we have made progress. As to the second, sir, I'll have to get back to you.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous
Gentleman
consent
yields back.
request.
Unanimous consent request from the gentleman from New York.
I ask unanimous consent to introduce an unsigned memorandum from July 7, 2025 that says we did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties with the insignia of the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Without objection.
Had the FBI director actually read the documents his own agency controls? Documents that victims say contain over 20 names. Men who weren't just present, not just acquaintances, but allegedly the direct recipients of trafficked victims. And Patel's answer wasn't denial. It wasn't outrage. It wasn't even a defense. It was something far more revealing: distance. He said he hadn't personally reviewed the files. His agents had, supposedly. Multiple offices had, allegedly. And somehow, after all that reviewing, after all those years, after all those names, nothing credible came out of it. But credibility, when you think about it, isn't a fact. It's a decision. A decision made by the same system that has every incentive not to embarrass itself, every incentive not to expose the powerful, and every incentive to protect the kind of people Epstein moved in silence for decades. And as Patel spoke, you could feel that decision happening all over again, because the congressman didn't walk into that hearing with rumors or internet theories. He walked in with details from the FBI's own Epstein 302 forms, victim statements recorded by federal agents. Statements naming specific, recognizable figures: a global banker, a Hollywood producer, a royal, a music industry heavyweight, 6 billionaires, a former government official, a politician, even a car company owner from Italy. Names that, if ever spoken out loud by someone in Patel's position, would detonate across the world. And yet here he was, claiming he hadn't personally read the documents, saying no new information had been brought to him, saying the victim's own statements somehow weren't credible enough to lead to charges, while refusing to say who made that determination or why. That was the first red flag. And it wasn't small. Because when you're talking about a network built on secrecy, leverage, and the vulnerabilities of young women, "I didn't read it" is not an answer. It's a shield. But the moment that really set the tone for the entire exchange came long before the questions even started. It was when Patel sat in the same chair where he had previously told senators that there was no credible evidence Epstein trafficked victims to anyone besides himself. That line wasn't just surprising, it was impossible. Victims had testified otherwise. Investigators had written reports. The public record contradicted him. Yet he said it anyway. So when Congress pressed him on it again, this time with documents, statements, and names attached. It cornered him in a way that exposed something deeper, a system built on selective investigation, and the congressman didn't stop there. He brought out the documents one by one, articles and records already in the public domain, but curated carefully to show the pattern everyone keeps trying to ignore. A former labor secretary quoted saying Epstein belonged to intelligence and was hands-off. Reports describing Epstein's private calendar showing planned meetings with high-ranking government and intelligence officials. A bodyguard warning about ties that still haven't been fully explained. Dozens of meetings between Epstein and a former prime minister who once led his country's military intelligence. None of this was new. But seeing it compiled, presented formally, placed into a congressional record, that was new. Because it created a trail the public wasn't supposed to have, a connection officials weren't eager to confront, and Patel knew it. That's why his answers suddenly became vaguer, softer, more procedural. He kept repeating phrases like, the FBI will review, the FBI has looked, multiple offices have examined. He never said he looked. He never confirmed who decided nothing was actionable. He never specified what credible meant. Instead, he wrapped his answers in the one thing institutions do best when cornered: bureaucracy. But it was the next part that truly exposed the disconnect between the system and the survivors at the heart of this story, because Patel did find time to appear at a White House event where binders of Epstein-related documents were handed out to social media influencers. Influencers, some of whom stood to gain followers, clicks, and brand deals from the spectacle of it all. But when asked if he would personally meet with the victims themselves, he backed away. Said the professionals could handle that. Said the FBI would meet anyone with information, but never committed to meeting the people whose lives were torn apart. And that's the moment everything became painfully clear. In rooms like this, victims aren't people. They're data points, statements, case files, potential liabilities, numbers that can be filed or dismissed depending on what narrative needs to survive. They aren't offered the same access as influencers. They aren't granted the same consideration as officials. They aren't even recognized by name unless someone slips up and fails to redact properly, which, according to the congressman, already happened. That's not an accident. That's a culture, and the evidence of that culture kept piling up. When Patel was asked whether he had seen any CIA files on Epstein, he dodged. When asked if he would want to see them, he dodged again. When asked about major unsolved cases like the pipe bomb from January 6th or the Las Vegas shooter's motive, cases that millions of people still have questions about, he said investigations were ongoing or that he would get back to them. It became obvious that this wasn't a hearing about answers. It was a hearing about boundaries, about what kind of information powerful institutions are willing to share and what they will fight to keep buried. And that's what makes this entire exchange so important, because it wasn't just a tense moment in Congress. It was a window into something the public rarely gets to see: the limits of transparency inside a system designed to protect itself first, answer questions second, and serve justice. Somewhere further down the list, that Epstein's case has always carried the fingerprints of intelligence connections, sealed files, and unexplained protections. Multiple administrations saw pieces of it. Multiple agencies touched it. Yet somehow, over decades, the core truth, the full list of people involved, the conditions of his protection, the nature of his network, remains locked away. And when you watch a powerful official dance around the simplest questions, when you see him avoid reading the very documents the public keeps begging for, when you watch him claim no credible evidence exists despite victims, statements, and files, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. It doesn't matter which agency you trust. It doesn't matter who's in charge. It doesn't matter how many hearings they hold or how many binders they release. Because the fundamental question isn't whether Epstein acted alone. It's whether the people tasked with exposing the truth are the same ones shielding it. And if that's the case, then this isn't just a story about one man or one scandal. It's a story about power, about accountability, about institutions that decide what the public gets to know and what stays hidden forever, and about the victims whose voices are still waiting to be heard, not by influencers, not by headlines, but by the people who claim to be seeking justice. The exchange you just saw wasn't about answers. It was about pressure. Pressure building publicly, finally, on a system that has avoided accountability for far too long. And if that pressure continues, if the public keeps watching, questioning, demanding, then one day the names inside those FD 302s might finally see the light. But that day won't come on its own. It only comes if people stay informed, stay engaged, and refuse to let the most powerful network in modern history quietly dissolve into silence. Thanks for watching. If you want more breakdowns like this, deep dives they don't want you to see, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next.